And we changed the locks, then learned the door. You can tell when a hardware store has been in the family. The keys hang like jewelry, and someone behind the counter knows your building's personality better than you do. My name is Lewis. I'm a locksmith, second generation, technically third if you count the stories. And the man I loved was Marco, who runs a neighborhood cafe that teaches strangers how to forgive each other before their espresso is ready. We kept 3 rules on an index card shoved in the frame of the hallway mirror. Be home when you say. Don't rehearse breakups. Kiss before sleep. We didn't write anything about night calls from tenants who swear they've been burgled, creative directors who prefer their doors a half shade of wrong, or how a key between your fingers can make desire think it had a plan. The call that started it came at 2:19 a.m. Trembling voice, woman, 4th floor, broken cylinder. I just need to feel like the door knows my name. I went because that's what I do when the city pretends to be a subtitled movie. Marco murmured, "Be careful," into my shoulder and went back to dreaming decent dreams. The building was a pre-war tenement with a late-life mode of scaffolding around its lower floors. The cylinder had been jimmied, inelegantly, the way men try to make shortcuts feel like craft. I changed it and left 2 spare keys on the counter with a note that said none of this is your fault. On my walk back I passed the new gallery, angles and glass, still smelling like adjectives. In the window hung a neon sign that said the door is not the house. Clever, cruel, true. Inside, as I paused like a pedestrian who wants to be caught looking, a man moved under track lights with the ease of someone who thinks the room owes him participation. He had a jacket that made navy rude and a mouth you could imagine using verbs. He looked up, caught me, smiled in a way that made the night feel like a hallway. "Come in," he mouthed, and I did the most responsible thing I could think of. I did not. I walked home. Marco had left a glass of water on my side of the bed and taken the quick breath he takes when he feels me fit back into us. Morning brought coffee and a stranger with a card. The stranger had an accent money tries to steal and introduced himself as Addy. "We're opening Saturday," he said, nodding at the gallery. "Our director, Daniel, says the front door sticks when you treat it like a promise. He wants a locksmith who speaks philosophy as a second language." I laughed and said, "We only teach nouns here," but I took the appointment. Daniel met me in the doorway the way men meet you when they've been appraised badly before. He shook my hand like a hypothesis and said, "We need the door to be confident without being smug." I said, "Every hinge fights shame in its own keyway." He smiled with relief like a person who has been flirting with the wrong trades for months. He showed me the lock, a European cylinder that had been bullied into American expectations, and watched me as I watched it. He smelled like clementine and a book I would pretend to have read. "It's not a bad door," I said. "It's a nervous one." He let me tune its anxieties. Marco stopped by with a bag of pastries because kindness is a habit and showing off is also a habit. I do both. Daniel thanked him with a nod that could pay rent. He looked at the pastries like currency, at Marco like narrative, and at me like a room he could learn. "We're doing an opening about boundaries," he said. "The show's called Thresholds." Of course it was. The city loves a metaphor it can invoice. We kept our normal. Marco's cafe filled with the kind of regulars who practice stability. He'd come home with coffee in his shirt and sugar in his grin, and stand behind me while I sanded a key blank. I'd lean into him without turning the sander off because the body knows which vibrations are love and which are labor. He'd ask about calls, and I'd tell him about hysterical dogs and calm tenants, and one artist who wanted his studio door to require a code and a sentence. "The sentence part," Marco said, "is going to be the betrayal." He kissed my neck like a seal. Daniel texted the way expensive people do, late, polite, direct. "The door still hesitates when the handle is certain," he wrote. "Can you coax it?" He sent a photo of the lock like a love scene. I replied with an appointment and a joke. When I got there, he was alone. The space was all white and secret. The door watched us work. I replaced the strike plate and shaved a whisper from the edge, touched it with wax, taught it to stop apologizing when asked to close. Daniel stood too close while I tightened the final screws. "You make it look like consent," he said, not actually leering, which can be worse. "I make it look like it won't hurt you," I said. He inhaled like laughter and exhaled like faith. He kissed me on the way out. Not a long kiss. The kind that makes you admit you are someone who could have been kissed by this man in this room and then walked into a different room like no rules had been read. My body liked it. My history disliked liking it. I left, did 2 more calls, and then did the necessary thing. Told Marco because I'm not trying to die of secrecy. He listened in the bathroom with toothpaste in his mouth and eyes that no triage. He spat, rinsed, tugged me into the hallway and put his hand on my throat, not tight, just honest. "Here," he asked, our ritual wrapper. I said yes, because forgiveness sometimes needs logistics before theology. After, he looked at the ceiling and exhaled like a person deciding to let a fire burn only in the fireplace. "Do you want him?" he asked. "I want the version of me he thinks I am," I said, hatting my accuracy. He nodded like he loved me anyway. The opening brought the worst parts of people who like to pretend they are better. Lanyards, champagne, the bold face of names that try too hard. The neon scolded in the corner, "The door is not the house," and everyone took pictures like the phrase had belonged to them when their ex left. Daniel worked the room like a secret with catering. He made a path toward me twice and stopped twice, the dialect of good manners and bad planning. Marco arrived later with a tray of little tartlets and a grin, and the room forgave itself for a minute. He introduced himself to Daniel with the competence saints like to pretend isn't sexy. Daniel said, "I love the pesto," and Marco said, "It's the basil we steal from the landlord's yard," and I felt like the hinge between them. After the opening, while the caterers argued with the recycling, Daniel found me by the lock I had made obedient. "You'll stay," he said. It was neither request nor command, it was conjuring. I looked at the door, it held. I looked at the neon, it glowed with a professional lack of conscience. "For a minute," I said, and I stayed for a kiss that tasted like clementine and inventory. We did not undress. It was worse. It was a policy. I failed to tell Marco that part immediately. I held it like a key in my pocket while we watched a show about people who do not suffer from professionals. He leaned into me with the trust that makes locks seem cruel at first and kind at last. In the morning I confessed. He listened, stirring oatmeal like stirring were an ethics. "Was it different?" he asked. "It was the same," I said. He laughed without giving me the gift of hearing it. "Then decide," he said. "Not all doors need to be dramatic." Addie brought a commission, custom work for a tech CEO who had bought an old synagogue and wanted it to be both sanctuary and startup. "He wants his boardroom to have a lock that can be opened by 2 people only at once," Addie said. "He thinks this is genius. He is 27 and correct about 3 things so far in his life." I started sketching while he talked. "Combination and key," I said. "Consent and commitment." Addie looked at my hands, thought something, unsaid it. Daniel invited me to lunch at a place that served bread like pardon. He talked about thresholds as if he'd invented psychology. He asked about my father in that precise way people do when their research consultants gave them your native language. He reached across the table and adjusted my watchband because it had ridden up my wrist. I watched his hand like it might be a tool I could borrow. He said, "You fix so much for strangers," and I said, "It pays rent," and he said, "What pays the rest?" And I pictured my hallway mirror with the index card and Marco's handwriting and told a truth I wanted to deserve. Home. He kissed me again that afternoon because he thought the lunch had given him that verb. This time I put a palm flat on his chest and said, "No." He looked wounded in the way men look when they're surprised to discover their charm is not an open override. "You will regret that," he said, not a threat, more like a boring prophecy. "I already do," I said, and meant I regretted wanting to be someone who could choose cleverly in rooms designed to make clever look virtuous. The affair that actually happened, which is to say the one I want to count and also forget, wasn't Daniel. It was Remai's, not the model, another Remai, because the city thinks repetition is cute. He was a sculptor who rented the basement studio of an old bathhouse and had hands like truths you earn. I'd been rekeying a door for the landlord when Remai looked up from clay and asked if the lock could be made to whisper. "Locks should thud," I said. "I want forgiveness," he said, and I said, "I'm not a priest," and he said, "You look like one when you hold a key." We kissed because neither of us had slept and because some rooms have old stories and ask you not to be the first man who denies them. It was quick and terrible. He tasted like wet stone. I hated how accurate that felt. I left, did 2 more proper jobs, went home, and told Marco with the punctuality of a man who wants very much not to turn into a kind of door. He listened, poured water, stared at the index card. "Change the locks," he said. We climbed 3 flights to our apartment and changed the deadbolt because that is how we bless a hinge. We added a 4th rule in pencil: don't borrow rooms to avoid building one. Then he put his hands on my face in that way he has when he's about to pull me away from a window and toward the floor, which in our house is the safer direction. I texted Daniel a sentence: "We are a lock that requires 2 to open." He sent back a single period like a gentleman who has learned the virtue of serving silence. He kept buying art and selling stories and pretending doors were metaphors instead of jobs. I kept making doors less afraid of people, and people less afraid of doors. Ramai made something with my mouth in it and didn't show me. Addie moved another commission across my bench and asked me what consent looks like when you're working with brass. "It looks like alignment," I said. "It looks like a key that refuses to turn until the tumblers and the notches agree." Some nights I still walk past the gallery. The neon keeps insisting the door is not the house, and I keep agreeing and disliking agreeing. If the guard is bored and the city is polite, I go in and stand in front of a photograph of Daniel's. Yes, he forced the umlaut on us, showing a hand on a knob and sunlight making the choice for them. I think about all the rooms I've let parts of myself into and barred the rest. I go home with my own key. Marco sleeps on his side and pretends not to snore. I place my hand on his chest and count the way we taught the tech CEO to count while unlocking his boardroom. 2 hands, same time. It is not a metaphor when you're tired, it is a technique. He opens eyes, mouth, arms in the order I love, and I whisper here, into his shoulder. He says yes, because love is the only bolt that doesn't wear out. People ask me sometimes what locksmithing taught me about love because people love a tidy interview. It's this: a lock is an agreement renewed every time it works. Keys change, so do doors. Hinges fail, so do men. If you're lucky, you learn which rooms you can afford to enter and which you can survive leaving. We changed the locks, then learned the door. We were home when we said we would be. We kissed before sleep. And when someone says the sentence, standing, "The door is not the house," I say, "Correct," and go upstairs to the only room that argues with me and knows how to win.